Today, I'd like to talk about one of the big areas of concern in terms of the environment. As we look at the Laudate Si platform and different proposals for helping to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions in society, and also to improve the quality of our air, our water, and our soil. Recycling has become a rather large issue in this whole concern. And one of the movements that is taking place now is to require manufacturers rather than taxpayers to expand and to pay for increased recycling. And the theory behind it is very interesting, that it is the manufacturers who really are creating a problem. They're trying to sell their product, which of course they have every right to do, and they're trying to sell it in a reasonable way, a cheap way to increase their profit, because obviously we live in a society and they have businesses that need a profit to show profit, so they can pay their workers, they can help with their selling of their stock. All of these things are certainly very important in society. But however, the question is raised, if you are putting a product out there and the packaging of that product is harming the environment, you are really creating some costs. We tend to look at, well, I sold it, I got the money, this is it, it's done, the transaction has taken place. And from one perspective, that's certainly true, but there's a whole other perspective that says, well, yes, but you have sold something, and the packaging of that stays around for years and years. And that packaging actually, when it breaks down, if it's plastic, and becomes PFAS and gets into our soil and gets into our water and contaminates our ability to flourish, it's going to have some negative, impacts in terms of health outcomes. So this packaging material breaks down, it gets into the soil, somebody consumes the products from that, whether it's fish, whether it's different, wheats and corn and all of these things that sustain us. But yet, this packaging material is contaminating. And so the manufacturer, who has already made the profit, is now causing all of these health consequences. So who is responsible? Is the manufacturer responsible? Is the consumer responsible? Is the government responsible? So they have to deal with increased medical costs. People that are being harmed and injured by this pollution now present themselves to doctors and nurses and hospitals and medical clinics, and all of this now has to be taken care of and addressed while the manufacturer is off manufacturing other items that are then going to perhaps break down in the soil and affect the air quality and affect the water that we drink. And in a lot of these situations, it is the consumer who winds up paying that extra cost. So, for example, in many situations, water companies are dealing with increased levels of carcinogenic chemicals, or carcinogenic causing chemicals in the water, and so they have to filter them out. It can be a very expensive process, filtering all these out, and who is paying for that? Well, the government, well, maybe through taxation, but also the consumer, who's got to pay increased water bills due to this. So you look at it and say, well, what about the manufacturer? the responsibility of the manufacturer in this whole situation. So the concept here is that manufacturers should be required to make more easily recyclable packaging and would be charged fees for the waste that they create. So if you're a manufacturer and you're creating waste, instead of reducing waste, you should be charged for that because that waste is picked up by the government and then by the individual taxpayer, really, because the government is not an entity out there. The government is you and I paying those increased taxes. So you have to look at it from a wider perspective. And you can see the manufacturer saying, well, I don't want to get involved with that. I just want to make the product and sell it. The person is buying it. Who cares about the waste? It's not my responsibility. My responsibility ends when I put it on the shelf. The consumer buys it. They pay me. That's it. I'm done. Forget about it. But is that really the case? So this idea of producer responsibility, and the word is very interesting, isn't it? It's responsibility. Who has the responsibility in this situation? Who has the responsibility for cleaning up the mess that is caused by this waste? Where does that responsibility lie? Does it lie with the manufacturer, with the producer? Does it lie with the individual consumer who maybe shouldn't buy the product? Is that the level of responsibility? Well, I'm not going to buy that product because it's not made in recyclable packaging. Is that where the responsibility lies? Does the responsibility lie with the government? To say, well, you can't produce something, you can't sell something that is going to create a waste situation for us because it's going to have all these negative consequences in our soil, our water, and our air. And we don't want that. So it becomes a discussion, a dialogue as to where does the responsibility lie in the situation. And of course, what is the aim of this? The aim is to reduce the recycling waste stream. We look at it and say, well, the waste stream is just too large. There's too much waste. We've got to now take steps to reduce that. Where do we put the waste? Do we ship it to, another area and say, well, you deal with the waste? So this becomes an issue. This movement is called extended producer responsibility. And in future videos, we're going to take a look at this concept. And again, it's something to discuss, something to think about, something to ponder, and say, well, what can we do to create a better situation? Pope Francis is calling us to this ecological conversion, this different way of dealing with our environment, to be better stewards. So how can I accomplish this? Very important question for all of us to ponder and discuss, and to try to come up with new ways of dealing with these difficult situations, because we all want to reduce the waste stream. We all want to be better stewards for our environment.